Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Hirewell Recruiting Insights podcast. I'm your host, James Hornick, partner at Hirewell. With me this week, Emily Goor.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Emily is an all-star recruiter, part of our staff here, but more importantly, our Hire Wellness Chair.
Honored to be here today and to be the Hire Wellness Chair. Still working on trademarking that, by the way. Hire Wellness, don't take it, anyone.
So what goes into Hire Wellness? I think that's kind of the first key thing that people are going to want to hear about.
What goes into Hire Wellness?
Yeah.
Well, the name in itself is genius, if I may say so myself. Hirewell, of course, and wellness mesh together. But I think it's also just about feeling good no matter what that means for you and being able to feel good and have that idea of wellness incorporated hopefully in the workplace, but whatever makes you feel good in and out of work.
So for those of you guys who have no idea what we're talking about, Emily is, how many videos on LinkedIn now with the wellness videos?
We just actually recorded our third Hire Wellness tip, but we're trying to do some weekly tips.
The first two went viral, so
we're trending. Yeah, so, we've had a get outside and take a walk one, drink your water one, cheers. And I guess we can sneak peek the new one, huh? Yeah, some eating tips so that you don't go into your afternoon food coma. So look out for that one.
Yeah, so I figured we'll get the most trending person to join me on the podcast today. So for those of you who've been following us, we're changing the format a little bit. There's 3 topics we want to talk about this week, but we want to make sure we're getting more people at Hirewell involved with some of these conversations, and some of the stuff we're talking about today I wanted Emily specifically for, because how long have you been recruiting for now in total?
I'm actually coming up on my first year anniversary.
Okay.
So the answer is not that long. My first year anniversary here and first year anniversary recruiting anywhere.
Perfect, because the first thing I want to talk about is getting into recruiting. How do you know it is the right career for you? And I thought you'd be the perfect person to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about kind of candidate, a little bit related, but really from like a candidate experience angle, what makes a good recruiter. I'd be kind of curious to hear your thoughts on what you've noticed about yourself that works so far and what you've learned from other people that seems to resonate with candidates and people you work with. Then lastly, we're going to talk about my least favorite topic.
Oh boy.
We're going to talk about ghosting.
I knew it. I knew it was favorite. You should have beat you to it.
I don't even know how we got onto this topic again, but
Mister, have you seen Fox News, anyone? Yeah. This guy.
Fox Local News. Okay. I'm a local celebrity. Anyways, I guess a little bit about, is there anything you just want to highlight about yourself? So you said 1 year. Yeah. Why don't we kind of go into it this way? So been with us for just about a year. What were you doing previously?
I was actually a teacher. I taught for 4 years at a charter school on the south side of Chicago, mostly 6th grade math and science. So I'm also our math subject expert here at Hirewell, 6th grade at least. And yeah, made the switch about a year ago. And I think what's funny is I don't know if anyone intends to get into recruiting. There's no
one in the
you get
history
your bachelor's in recruiting.
What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a recruiter.
Right. And I've talked to some other people around the office too, and not a single person was like, oh, I knew when I was in college, I was going to be a recruiter. What did you study? Oh, I studied talent acquisition. It's not really a thing. So I think when I decided that, teaching wasn't going to be for me long term, it was kind of about taking a step back and, thinking a little bit what my strengths were and what really made me happy and kind of got me ticking, and decided that definitely needed to be working with people. I think that's the cool thing about recruiting is you're in the business of people. Mm-hmm. You're interacting with people all day, whether it's on the client front, the hiring managers, the candidates. So I think that was something that really helped me.
Didn't you take some sort of what were you telling me, an assessment test that told you to be a recruiter?
My Strengths Finder test. Kind of, honestly. So I took a Strengths Finder test. This is my Gallup Strengths Finder plug. And 2 of the main ones that kind of made me want to go more of the recruiting, maybe sales type of routes were communication, and one that's called WOO, that's WOO, mm-hmm. and it stands for winning over others.
Yeah.
Are we surprised? No.
Slightly.
Well, here we are. And so I think a lot of, just those things kind of wanting to cater to my strengths and just interacting with people, and I knew it couldn't just be any sort of sales, because when you're working at a recruiting agency or if you will, at a staffing agency, then there's definitely some sales aspects, but it's all about people.
Yeah.
Is the point for me. It's I needed to be working with people.
It is the business of people, but you kind of brought up a few interesting points, because I think it is different for everyone, though, because being a recruiter, there's a lot of different aspects to it. A lot of people don't realize it, at its core, it's a sales job. Yeah. And it's becoming a sales and marketing job. I think the best, I mentioned this last week on our other podcast, like the best recruiters now are people who are both salespeople who at least have an understanding of content marketing, because they have to be able to write, you have to be able to articulate and communicate with people, and you have to be a good listener. There's some people that got into this because they like the human aspect of, and it's not social work, but you are changing people's lives, at sometimes.
The hope, yeah.
You're also helping companies. There's companies that, and this is true for both internal and external recruiters. So I don't want to paint this just in the way of kind of what we do externally here, but there's a lot of people who work because they enjoy they might not have an interest in the specifics of what a company does. If you work for McDonald's, you might not have a ton of interest in what they do, but you might like the organization and want to help it grow and those types of things. So there's a lot of people who get into recruiting because of that aspect. A lot of people like it because you're partially a career counselor. You're partially, how should I say, your people shrink sometimes, you know what I mean? You have a lot of those conversations where you're helping people kind of work through their issues. So it really kind of depends on everyone. I don't know, what struck you, I guess, most about, might be putting you on the spot here, but what it is now, compared to what you would thought it was a year ago? Like what's the difference, or what lined up and what maybe was a little bit different?
I think, like you said, I think getting into it, you definitely don't realize like how many hats you're going to be wearing. Like you said, you have to be a salesperson, you have to be a little bit of a marketer, you have to be a relationship builder, a career counselor, you have to be sometimes a therapist, like you said. So I think kind of getting into it, I didn't really realize how many hats I would be wearing. But I think, a lot of what has lined up, I guess, is just the expectation that you are definitely working with, it's all about people, and it's, I think that can be, the challenge at times. It can also be the best part at times. People are fluid, people have lots going on. So I think a lot of it just really needing to build relationships and hopefully I think empathy is a huge thing that I didn't realize would play as big of a part, and it has played. I think you have to be empathetic to be successful in this type of role.
Definitely. I think that you have to, if I was going to articulate why I think some people have a negative experience with recruiters, it's 100% of the time maybe the people who aren't empathetic, who are in the industry. And those people typically, they end up going somewhere else after a certain period of time. But everyone I know, both here, people who are internally, people working at other firms, people who just like have a passion for the industry, always have that same trait where it has to be genuine. You can't fake it. You have to actually care to help others, both helping your clients. You might have strong relationships with your hiring managers. You want to make them look good. You want to see them succeed, and they can't do it unless they actually have people they need. But also helping people. There's people I met 15 years ago that I'm, in those early days when I was just getting into this myself, that, I'm still talking to, that I might have placed a few times. And it's interesting to see how people's career progress. And, I think there's always inflection points with people, like you can see like the move they made and what the impact that had with them over time. So I don't know. I always thought that was kind of interesting. So
no, totally makes sense. I think definitely the people should certainly know, no matter what type of recruiting you're in, like you said, whether you're internal at a company, whether you're working at an agency, it's there's definitely a lot of aspects to it that you might not expect.
And we kind of inadvertently dovetailed into like the next kind of thing we want to talk about here, but what makes
segue?
Yeah, nice. Also, we kind of segued without segueing, but candidate experience, what it comes down to, and what's going to provide a positive candidate experience, which is ultimately the aspects of what makes you a good recruiter. I think that the way that, and the thing I always harp on again and again, is that recruiting has become a marketing function, and there's a name that's employment branding, that's candidate experience, it's all these things that I think some companies are building out dedicated areas just based on that. But even if you don't have a team focused on that, and really the focus of those teams when they exist is talking with hiring managers, talking with recruiters, making sure everyone's on the same page and presenting the same face. But you have to be able to do that even if you don't have a team that's dedicated towards it. And I guess focusing on kind of what you do. We as a third party, we're an extension of the companies you work with. So really kind of being on the same page with what it is they're trying to accomplish, how they want to present their culture. Part of it's making sure the companies we work with, or if you're an internal recruiter, your company has an idea of how they want to present themselves to candidates, has core values and those types of things, and then making sure you are also presenting them. So what have you, I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah.
Like I'm very opinionated on this because it's kind of what I do, what I focus most of my day on, but you being 1 year in, like what have you noticed that works, and what has helped you build good relationships with people that you worked with?
Well, I think the first thing you said is like just the idea of building relationships. I think like that makes a candidate experience way, way stronger, and it's everything from just really getting to know a candidate. And like, when the first time you're hopping on a phone call with someone, it doesn't have to be right away, like, this is the job and this is the company, but actually starting to get to know the person, getting to know the actual candidate, him or herself, I think is the first step. And then, just creating that relationship where you can recall important things about the candidate, whether it's something as simple as, you're checking in with them on Monday and like, hey, how was your, trip to Denver this weekend, or how's your kid feeling? Because when you're remembering those important details about their lives, I think it means a lot to them, and it does enhance their experience throughout the process. I think another huge thing that makes just really important a lot of aspects of this job and throughout recruiting processes, and for hiring managers to know, for us to be aware of, is transparency. Always transparency, clarity in the process, and just being clear about expectations, and hopefully being able to like mitigate those expectations with a candidate. So knowing, hopefully not telling them, oh yeah, we'll get back to you tomorrow. Sometimes it's like you might not be able to get back to them till next week, but just being able to say up front, this is the timeline and this is when I'll get back to you, or sometimes checking in even when you don't have any news, right? Just checking in for the sake of checking in, because I think people really appreciate that. I think it means a lot.
I think that the transparency is the biggest thing, and it goes both ways. If there's one thing that, again, that I'll harp on, I don't even want to get on topic, but like, the no salary history law, which I think goes in effect on Sunday. Like that's coming up. Yeah, by the time this podcast is live, it'll be live. So it's going to change the complexion of how companies need to communicate what it is they're going to have to communicate their salary bands, and they're also got to, so it's going to be a fundamental kind of shift in the way that people run their internal process. And I've said that candidates they can't be asked about their salary, and they don't need to tell any specific details, but they're going to want to make sure, especially if a company tells them kind of what a range is, that they're being transparent kind of in return. I would say the only thing that was good about the days where you can ask salary is that you would find out right away if like, okay, are we in the range or not, right? Now overall it was bad, and it's good that is now no longer on the table, but I think it's going to be important on both sides to be transparent, and it has to start on the company side, it has to start on the recruiter side. Like they're the ones who's the employer, they're the ones who are like, paying someone to do work for them. They have to in good faith kind of take the lead on that side of the relationship. If you expect a candidate to be transparent with you, you have to make sure you're kind of doing that on your end first. You have to kind of earn that level of trust from anyone who you want to work for you and that type of thing. So anyway, I guess another thing too is, and this is more from I guess myself and something you'll probably see over your career, is your credibility and how much of a factor that plays in. And I think transparency leads directly into this, is just a level of just being honest with people all the time, and not making sure you're not focused on trying to get someone to take this job that you're working with them on, but making sure it's focused on what's really right for them, and making sure you're being true and honest in terms of how you're presenting things, and being okay if they disagree with you, because it's their decision, their life and whatnot. And a lot of times that's how the best relationships are made with people long term, is you have to put aside kind of yourself and your own ego and what you really want this person to decide, because it's going to benefit you, and making sure it's more focused on what they want. And I think that when you're able to do that, and when you're able to make that, that's how you can ultimately make a better match. Because really the goal should be, you want a long-term relationship formed, not just between you and the candidate, but you and the client that you're working with.
Yeah.
And companies, if you're an internal recruiter, like you want to make sure that you're hiring people and that you're presenting yourself with the best foot forward, because when you're talking about the trust between your company and someone that you're bringing on board, you're the face of that. You're the first person that has, it's if you don't do a good job on that on day one, it's never going to be the same kind of longer term. So it's always kind of providing that level of providing credibility for yourself.
Yeah, and like you said, hiring, it's not transactional. You know, like you said, like sometimes the goal is just building that long-term relationship. I mean, there's, you know, certain types of sales and things that are just more transactional. It's not that type of business at all.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, like you said, is just kind of having that credibility, and it's not, you know, if something's not a fit either on, you know, a company's end or on a candidate's end, it's not about fitting like a square peg in a round hole. You know, just because it might be what's best temporarily. I think that you really have to think, it's a more consultative approach and thinking about what's, like you said, what a candidate really wants, like really getting to know them and what's motivating them, because, you know, hopefully, like you said, down the line, you can always use that information to hopefully find something that does fit.
How have you, and this is one thing I'm curious about too, when you're talking about building credibility, it's really kind of building your domain knowledge, I think. And how have you been able to do that so far? Like, what's worked for you in terms of becoming, actually, why don't you tell, like, what skill sets have you worked on? Like, what's your focus? We kind of skipped over that. So.
Well, it's funny you ask. So at first, honestly, like one of the first roles that I helped fill was a truck driver. So that's my.
That was your first. That was
my
your first.
Fill? Well, it was my first thing I sourced on was a truck driver.
Okay.
So that's what I always my like go to, like what do you recruit for? Oh, truck drivers, you know, the usual. You know,
I did not even know.
Well, funny, first actual fill was an embroidery manager. So I gotta say, I worked on a.
When did we start doing this kind of work?
Hirewell, everyone, we do it all. Embroidery. I know a lot. If you have any questions. Anywho, most of my focus today is on sales roles, whether it's like entry level, business development representatives, all the way up to like enterprise AEs and, you know, sales managers. Still on the MRP team, so definitely, you know, still a part of working with companies, you know, going through a ton of hiring or growth or any sort of transition. But I'd say my main like area of expertise is probably in sales at the moment. And I think kind of the way that you hopefully become a subject matter expert is, I'd say, just asking questions, like being self-aware enough to know that at the beginning, like you might not be an expert, all right? And that's fine, but you have to be willing to learn and hopefully be inquisitive. And I think that's the main way. And I know, you know, of course practice, but like I said, is being just self-aware enough to know that, you know, you're gonna, maybe you might not be the subject matter expert yet, but you can keep asking questions and be willing to learn. There's always things to learn. Like you can constantly be reading up about your area. You can constantly be, you know, just even taking informational phone calls. You know, there's always a few extra minutes every day, hopefully. So I think just constantly challenging yourself to learn more, I think, is huge.
I think that, agree 100%. And I think that what's helped me a lot is, the thing that's interesting is just doing the job itself. So if you, when I started, I was in technology and kind of focused my career in technology recruiting. And the best way to stay current on what was new is just by talking to people every day and taking interest and asking questions to the candidates you're actually working with, and showing interest in what they're doing and showing that you're excited about it. They're more willing to help you kind of understand the basics of what you should be asking them. You know, when you're first starting out, like, it sounds kind of weird, but and then after a while, it all becomes kind of second nature. And I think that if you're working internally as a recruiter, because I think internal recruiters have a different challenge depending on the size of their company. So a lot of them work at organizations where they might be the only recruiter and they have to cover 5, 6, 7 different areas. Like at Hirewell, we work in 5 areas and we have people who specialize in all 5. Apparently we have 7, because I didn't realize we do truck driving and truck drivers and embroidery.
Surprise!
But it's easy for, when you're specialized like we are, it's easier to learn one domain area. But if you're internal and you have to learn all these other domain areas, it's hard to do it well unless you take a vested interest in seeking out that knowledge proactively from the hiring managers, other people internally who actually function in that area every day.
Yeah.
And where I feel for them a lot of times they're overworked. If you're trying to work 20, 30 recs and they're in 6 different areas, it's hard to stay. There's not a lot of crossover if you're working on an accounting position one day and a software dev position the next, But I mean, if this is what you enjoy doing, you have to make sure that it's not just becoming knowledgeable about yourself, but you need to make sure every candidate you're talking to knows that you're knowledgeable, because, and again, this is recruiters internally and externally, the market's so hot right now. If you're a software dev, if you're an accountant, if you're in these kind of skill sets, you've got tons of recruiters calling you, you've got tons of companies showing interest, and the ones that, no matter if you're a hiring manager, an HR person, a recruiter, an external recruiter, if you're the first line of whoever is doing phone screens, phone interviews with people, and they can tell that you really don't grasp what it is they do, no matter how great your company is, you're going to be at the bottom of their list. So it's always just kind of incumbent upon you to make sure you build your credibility again, to bring this full circle, by making sure you go out of your way to gain that domain knowledge any way you can.
Yeah, and I love what you said about just you learning from candidates. I swear I've learned the most from just talking to candidates, because I think the best candidates are actually kind of doing the best job of explaining their job to you.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Which you're like, oh, maybe at the beginning of the conversation, you're like, I am not 100% what this person does. But truthfully, the best candidates, they can explain it to you like you're a student, right? And then you have the best grasp on what they're doing after the conversation. And then the next conversation you have can be, you're that much more clear on, what the role is and what they're doing.
And all these qualities work together. So there'll be some people you'll talk to that you're working on recruiting for, and they know they're in a really niche skill set.
Right.
So they're aware that a lot of people are just not gonna know what they do. And they also aware that if you're a recruiter or an internal HR person, you can't possibly know what they know about their industry. But they appreciate the fact that that you try and you put your best foot forward, you kind of taught yourself the basics. I think that what's been interesting for me as a recruiter is I do our marketing now at Hirewell, and that's because 5 years ago we saw there was an opportunity to get into recruiting for marketing. So, and then picking up all those things just from having lots of conversations. There were a lot of different aspects of marketing I had no idea existed, and I think most people don't know these things exist.
Right.
But if you have the right level of enthusiasm and positivity and carry yourself in a way that you're credible and people can tell that you're genuine in your interest in helping them out, it can definitely, they're more likely to want to work with you and become your teacher, to kind of help you build your knowledge base. So
I think enthusiasm is huge too. I know you just said enthusiasm, and that made me think
that's why you're a natural at this game.
Well, I think it's important though too, like you said, if you're the first line of defense, right? The first, no matter if you're the hiring manager, you're the initial phone call, internally, externally, doesn't matter. If you're not enthusiastic about whatever the role is that you're filling, or about the company that you're filling it for, or just anything, I think enthusiasm here is pretty key, because I think it rubs off on the conversation and on the candidate that you're speaking to.
On that note of credibility, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up, the feedback loop.
The feedback.
And this actually, because this actually dovetails perfectly into my next category here, ghosting.
Okay.
I think when people, so let me go this the most roundabout way possible. So over the summer, we got contacted by, it was our former accountant. I think someone he knows works for the local Fox affiliate, and they were doing a segment on ghosting. So the candidates, what was I going to say? They had the segment already kind of preset and kind of what they wanted to do, what they wanted to talk about. It was about people who were either leaving their job without notice, or people who were just bailing on an interview when they got an offer. And so they asked us hey, do you have any can you give us some sound bites? They came in the office I got to be on local TV, which I never watch.
And 5 minutes.
And I found out which 5 of my friends actually watch local television, because the person at the diner recognized me or something like that. So I posted.
Your autograph,
Yeah, I was a local
cool.
celebrity.
No big
So
deal.
I posted on LinkedIn, and the immediate backlash, which is still kind of comical to me, because it sucks when people just bail on their employer, but how about the 100% of us who have not heard back from a company at some point in time when we applied for a job there or did an interview there. And it was like, guys, I didn't, this wasn't my topic, this is someone else's topic. I was just on the news, I was posting this because I was really happy with it. But you all have great points.
Yeah.
And I think that there's this kind of stigma or this idea that, what was I going to say? I think there's a narrative that certain media outlets are trying to create that the millennials are going to bail on jobs and it's some new phenomenon. And the thing is, like, it's been around forever. I don't think it's any level different than it ever was. I think it's always more prevalent in junior people who aren't as mature in their career. There's certain industries where it's more prevalent in, the gig economy, when people can find, can work for themselves and they work for a boss they can't stand, they're more likely to leave. And, I'm fine with all of it. Like, it's not that, I don't think it's any different than it was. But what drives me crazy is companies that ghost on the interview process. And I actually didn't even understand how widespread it was. Like, the comments I got in LinkedIn, and this is just because I'm not to toot my own horn, but like, I'm a very process-driven person. When I work with someone, I have tasks set up, and I don't clear those out until, if I let them know they didn't get a job or whatever. I just assume that's how everyone worked their day, but apparently it's not. And it's more, I think that what struck me also is odd is that nearly 100% of people have been ghosted on at some point in their career after an interview process. Yet, where are they when their own, like, if you would think that the experience people have that's been so negative would turn around and that their own company would stop doing it because everyone who's in that position had that happen to them and didn't like it, yet it still persists. Right. Which is odd.
It is.
Does that make sense?
No, totally. It makes complete sense. I think it all ties back to candidate experience, like you said. I think it means, and hopefully this is a message to everyone, but it means so much more. I mean, I hate to say it, but I've had 5 conversations even this morning of giving candidates feedback, and even if it wasn't positive feedback, I know that they were so appreciative to even get the feedback, like you said, closing the loop, and that it was because the great feedback came from the hiring manager. So I think it's something that hopefully all hiring managers should know, and like you said, be empathetic and put themselves in the shoes. And maybe at one point in their lives, perhaps they were ghosted by a company, or they did hear back and how good it felt, even if it wasn't great news. But I think, like we said, like, any news is good news, and any news is helpful and appreciated.
So I think the reason why it's important that companies figure this out is because the job economy and the talent economy is so competitive. You got unemployment at 3%, or whatever it is, all-time lows. And everyone who's trying to hire is having a hard time doing it. And whether they realize it or not, there's so much word on the street. When you get a reputation for that type of company that doesn't get back to people, that doesn't respect people's time, it gets out. People hear about it. I mean, it shows up on Glassdoor and sites like that. People just generally have an idea. People talk to their friends. A lot of these skill sets are very kind of small industries. It's no matter what town you're in, Chicago's a big city, but the subsects of kind of skill areas, everyone kind of knows each other. But I really think there's 2 things that kind of don't get talked about enough. One, I think it's an absolute failure of technology. I think that a lot of the way people run their process, whether it's HR or the internal recruiters or whoever, everything is so focused on, you have your ATS system. One, a lot of these systems are so outdated. Like, the idea that there's not some sort of automatic task system that reminds everybody to follow up so this stuff just doesn't happen. Like, it should be, all this money gets invested into recruitment technology. There's always some new recruitment technology startup, yet no one can figure out how to follow up people after they've been rolled out interview. Like, it's mind-boggling to me. There's all these new tools that have artificial intelligence. Why can't artificial intelligence figure out how to just let someone know they didn't get a job? It's just mind-boggling. So that's one thing that just irks me. And I think there are recruitment platforms that are better, that can do these things, but then it's an issue of, do the people who actually operate them know how to do it? Like, have they been properly trained, or have they taken an interest in it? So, I mean, you and I know, like, not everyone is tech savvy. There are some people that think, okay, we have this piece of technology in place, I'm covered. But if you don't actually know how to work that technology the way it's supposed to be used, like, it's still not going to do what you need it to. And I think that's I think that's one of the big contributors to the ghosting problem from the client side of things. And I was actually talking about this today a little bit earlier, is that it's kind of going back to what I mentioned before. It's solved on an individual level. If you like your company and you think people should work at your company, and you hear that someone got ghosted on, it doesn't matter what your job is. Like, you need to fix it. Like, if you've been ghosted on, you know how bad that feels, and then you like your company's doing, you think it's a good place, you recommend people to work here. Who cares if you're not the recruiter or the HR person? Like, clearly whoever's ever in charge of candidate communications is dropping the ball and not taking ownership.
So what do you recommend, like, those people to
run
do?
up the flag? I mean, 100% you're in the right on this one. Like, if like people, I will be amazed if you went to senior management or whoever's kind of properly up the chain and mentioned this an issue. Like, someone, I think people, if you want to solve the company ghosting issue, you have to start with your company. Assuming if it happens at your company, and assuming you like your company and you care, I guess is the caveat. But like, if you can answer yes to those 3 questions, I like my company, people should work here, and yes, this actually unfortunately happens here, just take action. Go to the HR team and tell them this is unacceptable. Go to your manager and say something has to happen, because there's a breakdown somewhere in the organization that no one's taking ownership. And if no one else is going to do it, like, it has to be you. So if
starting with the man in the mirror. Is this a singing podcast now?
Sure.
I can't carry a tune. I'm really sorry. We could probably edit that part out.
So I guess like the big net on that is, I think this is, no matter how you slice it, like, I do think like the technology aspect gums up the works a bit, but it's a lack of people caring enough to take ownership of the problem. And if the people at your company who it's actually their job aren't doing it, like, someone has to hold them accountable, and it has to be you. So if you're listening and you know that you've seen this happen in your company and you don't like it, do something about it, because otherwise, no one else is going to, and it's just going to kind of persist. And I think if everyone out there who's had a bad experience with being ghosted on took this kind of approach, like, it would go away.
Yeah.
So it's a grassroots movement to stop ghosting. So. Anyway.
You heard it here first, folks.
So, I don't know if I can rant anymore after that. So,
really, you can get James going on ghosting if you want to for hours.
I thought I was done talking about this conversation forever. So, anyways, I think that's kind of a wrap for a week here. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we let you go?
Gosh, I think that's it. But you know where to find me if you need anything else.
Go on to LinkedIn, connect with Emily. She will be providing more wellness tips.
It's higher wellness.
Higher wellness tips,
Gotta
which are a crowd pleaser.
Yes, we try.
And here's the second scripted part of the process here, which I always love. Thanks for listening to Hirewell's Recruiting Insights podcast. If you like what you heard and you want more insights from our recruiting experts, visit hirewell.com/recruiting-insights. Remember to subscribe on podcasts. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple products, Google products, or Spotify so you don't miss future episodes. Once again, ending the scripted portion. See you soon.